Hello, Eureka. This is my feedback to your paragraph from last week. Okay. The video speaker claims that is not always good. Okay. It's hostile to certain types of people. To prove his argument, he provides evidence, and then you've listed the evidence. Okay, nice. Now all of this in the exam, as you know already, this will be part of your identification paragraph, so this is very good material. You've identified the supporting idea and the evidence. The only thing I would say about the supporting idea is just a little bit vaguely stated. Diversity is not always good, it's just a little bit too general, the phrasing itself, but I get what you're trying to say. So good start. In the exam, again, it will be a separate paragraph. First we write the identification, then we move on to evaluation. Okay, nice. Now let's see what happens here. You think the evidence is not sufficient, and I agree with you, and to prove his statement, but the requirements cannot show the real number of group of people in the tech industry discriminate. Absolutely. Here there should be a study of statistical data that present the privilege of certain groups of people like Hispanics. Okay, nice. Another thing you could say, very nice here, another thing you could even expand a little bit, maybe there should be a study, maybe a random study, a random selection, but actually that will go to representativeness. Here you could say there should be a concrete study, maybe a meta-analysis, really studying a much larger number of companies and trying to figure out what's the percentage of companies which openly discriminate in their application requirements. You could say something like that. And then the one about the random selection of companies, you could keep that for the representativeness. Okay, so here just a little bit, you could just go a little bit further if you wanted to. What you have is also nice. And by the way, this is your first attempt. You did not even have a model, so you actually did a very good job considering that you didn't even, this is your absolute first attempt at writing this paragraph. Very good start, actually. As for the relevance, I think the speaker provides relevant information. The evidence supports the claim. It's clear that the tech industry is targeting certain types of people. For example, the law shows that all people have the right to do the job they want, while the requirement for them suggests the opposite. Besides, okay, so here, okay, I'll take that. Now, here, if you wanted to dig very deep, you actually would say that it's not relevant, not completely relevant, right? I agree with this part of the relevance. You've done a good job of saying why it is relevant. But if you wanted to dig a little bit deeper, you could say that it's not entirely relevant because that document, he shows that civil rights code, and that document is not very relevant because it's not the actual civil rights code. It is actually, it's a lawyer, it's an email, it's a response to an inquiry. Basically a lawyer is responding to somebody's inquiry, and they're asking him, is an intern considered an employee of a company? Does American law, corporate law, consider interns employees? And the lawyer responds, well, depending on the circumstances, they may or may not be considered. Now, the lawyer then lists a number of factors which need to be considered before you reach the decision whether the intern is an employee. And this is what the speaker of the video, one of the screenshots is not the actual civil rights code, but it's from that response of that lawyer to the inquiry. And the conclusion the lawyer reaches is very non-committal. He's not saying it's illegal. The speaker of the video uses that to say that it's illegal, but the lawyer himself does not say that. The lawyer says you just need to consider a number of factors. In some situations, an intern is an employee. In other situations, an intern is not an employee. Now, why is that important? It's important because if an intern is considered an employee, then it's not legal to hire them based on gender, race, or anything like that. But in those situations where diversity programs are simply targeting minority groups, if the intern is not considered an employee, then it's fine, presumably. So what the speaker does, he uses this response by the lawyer to claim that diversity programs are illegal. But the lawyer himself doesn't say that. He says that depending on whether the employee is considered, depending on whether the intern is considered an employee, then you can claim that these programs are illegal. But it's not always the case. There are many cases in which interns are not considered employees. They're just temporary hired. They're there to learn, for instance. So those entry requirements, we're looking for black, Hispanic women, whatever. There's nothing wrong with those, actually. So if you had to dig very deep, you would actually say that this evidence, when you say here the law shows, this evidence presumably is the civil rights code, but actually isn't. It's a lawyer's response to an inquiry about the civil rights code is not relevant because the lawyer himself reaches a completely different conclusion. But that would be digging very deep. What you said here is fine, more than fine, so that's okay. In the exam, if you have explicit references to sources and you look them up and you find that the source is saying maybe something slightly different, it could be a good idea to put that in one of the three sections, depending on whether you think it's representative, relevant, or sufficient. If you want to do that, you can do that. That's always a good idea. Look up the source, do a little bit of digging. You'll have more than enough time during the exam because it's over several days. And if you find that there is a mismatch, the speaker is kind of misusing that source, it'll be actually a very good thing to put in the paragraph. But what we've done here is very good. No problem whatsoever. Now let's go to the last part, which is so you're saying the evidence support, it's clear that the tech industry is targeting. For example, the law shows that people have the right, and while the requirements suggest, sure, okay, fine. So far it's relevant. Now the last bit, representative, it's representative because the speaker mentions several groups of people engaged in the tech industry. Sure, now let's think about that. How typical are these people? And who are these people? He's talking about, basically he's talking about job advertisements, diversity programs, asking for employees, potential interns, potential candidates from different kinds of groups. Now, the speaker examines these entry requirements of certain diversity programs. And the question here is, how typical are these diversity programs of the general picture in America, right? How representative is the Oracle internship of internships in the tech industry in general? How typical is that? He also, this Facebook internships and whatnot. How typical are these? Do they really represent the larger situation? Do they represent the average job advertisement, the average internship, right? This is what you can say in the representative part. So, and it's not very clear. I think he's just really cherry picking. He finds those internships which he finds scandalous, and that's the ones that he shows on the screen. But there are thousands of other internships that do not require their candidates to be minorities, to be black, Hispanic, and so forth. So I think you could attack the representativeness along these lines. How typical are these? Uh, how typical are these examples? The Oracle example and all the other ones. How typical are they of the average of the general situation in America in the tech industry, right? Overall, a very nice paragraph. I know that after the small group tutorial today, you're in even better shape. So great work, Yoriza. Keep up the good work. Next week we have another round of practice. There is another model coming up, and there is the mock exam. So I think you're in good shape. Okay, good luck.